We should be going. I'm going to mute everybody in a minute. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm just going to mute folks who came in, and thank you so much for being here with us on our, what is this, our third Tenacious live event. And tonight we have a really special treat. We have with us Rick Aytron. Rick is a tremendous award-winning photographer from the UK. He was with us on our Britannic expedition. Those of you who were here with us last week saw some of his amazing photos of the Bertigala and the Britannic. And tonight he's going to be talking about Ireland and the shipwrecks of World War I and World War II shipwrecks of Malin Head. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
Oh, look.
Just get started while I mute people. Is it working? Where's Rick? Oh.
Rick, you're on mute.
Sorry, Rick. I think I accidentally muted you. That's easy.
Can you see my screen with the title slide, the Malin Head Classics? Yeah, I can't hear you, Jen.
Yes, we can see it.
Right, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, my name's Rick Aytron. Many of you I know from both sides of the Atlantic. A good number on this, this Zoom call who I don't, and a big hello to you. And I hope today I can talk to you about the spectacular diving to be had off Malin Head. So there we go. I'm just trying to get my everything moving here. So that's just a picture of me on an English Channel shipwreck as well. So anyway, where is Malin Head? So bit of a map of the Atlantic, but Malin Head is here. It's the northernmost point of the island of Ireland, and it's separated from Scotland by the North Channel. But why is here so interesting to us divers and shipwreck hunters? It's because the North Channel is one of the main routes to the important ports of Glasgow, Liverpool, Belfast, and Dublin. So transatlantic shipping has to traverse this bottleneck and still does today. In fact, there'll be ships coming from the States to the UK and Ireland and back again who will go through this very stretch of water even today. And during the hostilities of both world wars, the German forces targeted the shipping here primarily using their feared U-boats. No, wrong way, hold on, I'll get this. To give you an idea of the number of shipwrecks, this is a screenshot of a small part of the chart. I'm going to use my mouse to point out a few of the wrecks we might be diving. That's Audacious there, Empire Heritage there. But if we look up at the top here, you can see there's 684 wrecks on this chart alone. In this part of the world, as divers, we really are spoilt for choice. So, a number of these wrecks have become known as the Malin Head Classics, but probably only 3 of them are the true primary classic wrecks. They are the Audacious, HMS Audacious, the Justicia, and the Empire Heritage. Secondarily, there's the U-89 and the Laurentic, which are sort of secondary wrecks. And I actually have no shots, and I'm not going to talk about the Laurentic at all, because the Laurentic is a dive that is done when the weather is unfavourable. And so if you're diving the Laurentic, it's only because you can't get to any of the others. And each of the wrecks I'm going to talk about is an absolutely spectacular example of what a shipwreck should be. So where's all this taking place? So this is a zoom in on the map. Look at the stunning coastline of North Donegal here. And the dive centre is here near this town of Carrickart. And the dive boat is moored here, and you can't see it because I've got text over it, but there's a town called Downings up here. And it's all based in these parts, very well sheltered harbour. The prevailing winds are from the southwest. So the harbour is really, really super. The Donegal coast is just spectacular. And there's a scenic drive that travels all the way around the coast. The image in the lower centre shows a road sign with the blue sign with the white wavy line, and that's the sign for the Wild Atlantic Way, which goes all the way around the coast of Ireland from Donegal down to the south. On the left is a picture of the dive centre, where there's also bed and breakfast accommodation, and on the right, the dive boat on the pontoon. So the dive boat is an 11-metre or 36-foot catamaran with a rear dive lift, and it's owned and run by Meaver Diving, who is the love child of Donald Cullen, and his son Dean is the skipper or captain of the boat. Now, I did visit Malin on Loyal Watcher back in 2004. That's the same boat that Mike Boring did his trip to Jutland on, which was talked about a couple of weeks ago. But at that time, I wasn't taking stills, and I had a load of shaky video, but I'm not going to show you any of that. I wouldn't want to. But I have attended trips here in 2017 and 2018 that had been organised by Barry McGill. I think he's on the call today, and his company, In-Depth Technical Diving. Contact details are here if anyone is interested in finding out more. But what it means is that as a diver, you can just turn up knowing that all the logistics are in place. Gas, cylinders, bailouts, etc. Are there, ready and waiting, which just makes life so much easier when you're traveling a fair old distance to get there. The diving in Malin Head is run on a single dive per day basis. Before I get on to the wrecks, just a bit about the photography. I'm not going to go overboard on the photography because I know this is a varied audience. But for both trips, I was using a Nikon D500 in a Nauticam housing. But I think the 2017 trip made me really completely reconsider my wide angle photography. And it's been driven by the improving low light, high ISO performance of cameras. I've indicated on some of the slides what the settings are, and we'll talk about that some more as we go through them. But if we were diving there today, I tell you, I'll be jumping in with a camera set to auto ISO with a range 100 to 10,000. The shutter speed set at a 40th and set at f6.3. And then I just modify things according to conditions. But the reality is that temperate or tropical waters, you don't get that much light once you're below about 40 meters or 130 feet. And I will also just say at this moment in time, I've actually moved to full frame, and I now use a mirrorless Nikon Z6 that has even better low ISO performance. So the first wreck we're going to visit is HMS Audacious. She was a spectacular King George V class dreadnought battleship, built by Camel Laird at Birkenhead near Liverpool and launched in 1912. And she was a big ship, nearly 600 feet long. She had 4 propellers driven by 2 steam turbines and had a top speed of 21 knots. She displaced 26,000 tons and was manned by 860 men and had 5 turrets, each with 2 13.5-inch guns, plus numerous smaller ones. When the First World War started on the 28th of July 1914, Audacious was assigned to the Grand Fleet commanded by Admiral John Jellicoe. And on the 27th of October at 0845, while taking part in gunnery practice, Audacious struck a mine laid a few days earlier by SS Berlin. Audacious captain Cecil Dampier thought the ship had been torpedoed, and that meant all the other large ships had to leave the area. And although Jellicoe ordered the smaller ships to assist, none of the larger ships or other battleships were able to help the stricken Audacious due to the supposed submarine threat. Initially, the ship could still make 9 knots, and Dampier believed he could make the safety of Loch Swilly, which is where the Laurentic is sunk, if you can recall the map, which was 25 miles away. But 2 hours later, rising water meant he had to stop. Cruiser HMS Liverpool and the White Star liner Olympic, that had answered a distress call, were able to assist. And the Olympic captain, Captain Haddock, suggested taking the ship under tow. This was done with difficulty, only to have the lines snapping as Audacious kept trying to turn into the wind. Rescue attempts continued, but without success. And then Jellicoe realized the submarines weren't a threat, and he ordered the battleship HMS Exmouth to attempt getting a tow onto Audacious. Sorry, I've just moved that too soon. We'll go back. All men were taken off Audacious at 18:15 because it was going dark. And before Exmouth arrived at 20:45, Audacious capsized. She remained at the surface for 15 minutes before a large explosion occurred, which threw wreckage a considerable distance and killed a rating on HMS Liverpool, half a mile away, who was hit by a piece of flying armour plate. It is thought that a falling high explosive shell detonated cordite in the magazine. But surprisingly, the rating was the only casualty of the sinking. So here she is now. Audacious, being such a large wreck, any week-long trip tends to schedule 2 dives on her. The first dive is usually around the turrets that have fallen upside down onto the seabed in the bow area. And so coming down the shot line, this is what you see. Then a bit lower down, we get this impressive view with a diver giving scale. The openings in the side of the turret allow you to look inside, and you can sometimes see sort of the machinery that works the turret. Closer view of the top of the turrets shows a jumble of high explosive shells. And the longer objects here are brass Clarkson cases that were used to carry cordite in the ship. Just out of interest, we've got some settings here. This is actually a strobe-lit shot, 3200 ISO. So this is one of the smaller casement guns that have fallen off the bulk of the wreck, but then the turret is lit up behind it. And for the photographers there, notice this one is ISO 6400. Not far from the turret is the remains of the bow. This is the very point of the bow. The audacious mooring ropes would have been fed through these substantial fairleads. Looking down on three of the team who have kindly lit up the wreck for me while checking out the bow, with one of the anchors remaining in a hawsepipe. And the last image of Audacious that I'm going to show here is this one. Now this is actually, I'm going to talk about this one as from the photography point of view as well. This is a handheld 6-image panorama that I stitched together in Lightroom. And on the left here is Renee Anderson, who is setting up to take a shot that actually won the 2019 Underwater Photographer of the Year Rec category. He actually, using a tripod, he actually basically did a selfie, because he went and took a picture of himself above the turret, illuminating it from above, and that was the image that won in 2019. And what's amazing is to have the water clear enough to be able to execute such an image. A lot of UK and Irish water does not have the clarity that they have up in and around Malin. I'll just leave Audacious with this view, which shows the team decompressing. Throughout the UK, we often use a lazy shot system for deeper dives. The dive boat always runs free and does not anchor into a wreck. And instead it puts a shot line down onto the wreck for the divers to descend and ascend. And also a decompression station or trapeze attached to the main shot line at about 20 meters or 60 feet. Once all the divers have passed the junction on their return, heading for the trapeze, the last diver up releases the station so that it drifts in the current. The dive boat can then recover the main shot line, and after that follow the station until the divers are ready to exit the water. Divers all have tags placed before they enter the water so that on return, the last diver knows they are last and can release the trapeze. Waters around the UK and Ireland have strong currents, so diving wrecks has to be done at slack water. Once the main part of the dive is over, slack water will pass and the current will start flowing again. Tidal streams can run at several knots, so a fixed decompression would be difficult and uncomfortable. Going to move on now to the U-89. This is a World War I U-boat built in 1917 at, if I get this right, Kaiserliche Werft in Danzig. And it was commanded by Wilhelm Borch. She was 65 meters long, that's 215 feet, and had a beam of 6 meters or 20 feet. She was caught at the surface and rammed by the cruiser HMS Roxburgh on the 12th of February, 1918. And on the left here is an artist's impression of the collision. There were no survivors from the submarine, and U-89 is actually the shallowest of the classics. And if the conditions are favorable, is often the first dive of a week-long trip. So this is a color version of that some of you may have seen of the image that was highly commended in this year's Underwater Photographer of the Year. In this version, I've actually removed a rather irritating rope that was on the left-hand side of the conning tower. Perhaps interestingly, I actually stitched this image together because, again, it's a panorama made of 4 shots. I stitched it together soon after the trip, but I wasn't at all happy with it. And then last year, after a Lightroom software update where Adobe reported improved function, I did it again, and the result was much better. There's a little bit of filling in at the gaps at both lower corners, but other than that, it's stitched as you see it, much better. So we'll take a trip around this U-boat. This is actually the bow. And again, it's just worth noting ISO 6400 here. I'll try and explain this now with the next shot. So we've got the diagram superimposed on top. So what you're actually looking at are these two torpedo tubes are sticking out here, but all this structure has been lost. All that remains is in effect the dotted line of the pressure hull, which obviously being a pressure hull is actually much more substantial than the rest of the ship. And this part of the ship was probably relatively flimsy metal and has just disappeared. There will a couple of other places where it will be apparent that the same thing has happened. So this is a slightly different view. This is a strobe-lit shot though, so ISO 1600. And you get a much darker background. And I think if it wasn't for the torchlight, it would be a very dark image. But the strobe does add a bit of color in the foreground, which is what you lose when you stop using the strobes up to a point. The U-89 had 4 torpedo tubes, 2 at the front and 2 at the back. So moving aft, we've got the forward 105mm deck gun, an impressive artillery piece. And during the First World War, U-boats often use these deck guns to sink unarmed ships, surfacing and then engaging the ship rather than wasting torpedoes on insignificant targets, where the torpedoes could actually be retained for larger ships. These shots are from around the conning tower and the periscope. On the left, the periscope is external to the actual conning tower, but as with the bow, it's likely there would have been some sort of structure, an outer protective structure around this. And then on the right, you've got the small aperture where the lens of the scope would be. These are both 6400 ISO images, and we brought a bit of color back on that periscope shot with a bit of video lighting. This is now the aft side of the conning tower. And the shot on the right shows damage to the actual pressure hull. And it's thought that this is possibly where the collision took place. Looking forward from above the exposed diesel engine with a rear 88mm gun and conning tower behind it. Again, the outer pressure hull has been lost here, possibly also related to the collision. These are the twin diesel engines of the submarine that we're looking at here. Strobe-lit shot, 1600 ISO. The diesel engines were 2400 horsepower and could propel the sub at a top speed of nearly 17 knots at the surface. And at a cruising speed of 8 knots, it had a range of 13,000 nautical miles. Just remember that. So if I were to pivot on this spot, turn around and look in the other direction, I would then see this. And looking aft is a diver. I think that might actually be Barry McGill himself, looking into the hatch of the torpedo room. To the left is a drum-like shape, which is one of the electric motors. These were 1200 horsepower, and they could drive the sub at a top speed of 9 knots submerged, and had a range of 56 nautical miles at 5 knots. Just think, we have range anxiety in our electric vehicles. That must have been quite significant. I got this shot by putting my camera and video light through the hatch, and there are 2 torpedoes still in place in the torpedo room. And then we get to the aft end of the ship. So this one's a bit of a blurry image, but and again, the outer structure of the sub has been lost, with the aft torpedo tubes uncovered and sticking out from the pressure hull. But you can also see the port or left-hand side prop shaft, but the prop itself you can't really see because it's covered in a load of netting. U-89 is the most distant of the wrecks, but often has the best and most amazing visibility, as you can see here. On the left here, a diver's collecting his tag on the ascent and just moving up onto the decompression trapeze. Just out of interest, you might want to know what the water temperatures are. 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit at depth, 14 degrees Celsius, 57 Fahrenheit on shallow deco. And that was in June. It does get a little bit warmer during the rest of the summer, but that is about what it is. It's fairly reasonable for doing 3-hour dives. And as the summer goes on, it obviously gets a little bit warmer. We're going to move on now to the Empire Heritage, built by Armstrong Whitworth at Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. She was built as the Tafelberg, a whaling ship, in 1930. She was 14,000 tons, 155 meters or 509 feet long, and powered by twin triple expansion engines. And she had a top speed of 11 knots. She was actually damaged by a mine in 1941 and broke in 2, was beached in South Wales. But she was later refloated, repaired, and then rebuilt as a tanker and renamed Empire Heritage, returning to service in 1943. Her demise came as part of convoy HX 305, and she was captained by James Jameson and was returning from New York with fuel oil and deck cargo when she was torpedoed on the 8th of September 1944 by U-482 with the loss of 112 lives. The wreck today lies in 65 meters or 214 feet. What she's more famous for, though, is her deck cargo. Although not all that cargo spilled off the ship, and you can here see on the right-hand side the outline of a Sherman tank. Away from the main wreckage, it appears as if a giant has had a tantrum and thrown his toys out of the pram. The tanks lay scattered on the seabed, and there are 5 in this shot. I particularly like this one because it looks as though that this foreground tank is ready to drive away, if only it could be lifted to the surface. Note the size of the gun barrel on this one. Sherman armaments were continually in development, and this may be a tank destroyer variant. Time underwater, though, means that some of them lose their barrels completely, and all the rope that's tangled around this one can't have helped with that. You can get around the whole wreck in a dive. There's not much to see at the bow apart from a big anchor, but there are 2 big triple. Sorry about that, I seem to have got muted then. I was just saying at the bow there's not a great deal to see. There's an anchor and a load of flat plates. If you recall the picture of the Tafelberg, she had her engines at the stern, and as she was converted into a tanker, that they kept it in that form. So she had rear engines. They're quite interesting to see, and you can also see the 5 boilers that make an interesting swim, especially when you're trying to keep up with 2 people on scooters and you've only got fins. But the other spectacle of this wreck is the massive prop that stands proud at the stern. And this is one of my favourite shots, with the 2 divers lighting it up. I particularly like this one, and again, it's one of those ones that with high ISO, but somehow the cameras can cope with it these days. And for wreck shots, I think it works really well. There's always time to take some deco shots. And even in this one, you can even see the Laura Dean keeping an eye on us at the surface. We're going to move on to the mighty Justicia, the largest of the classics at over 32,000 tons, and the deepest at 70 meters or 230 feet. She was originally built by the Titanic builders Harland and Wolff as the Staten Dam for a Dutch shipping company. But she launched at the beginning of July 1914, the same month the First World War started. So fitting out was delayed, and it was eventually completed by British authorities, who renamed her Justicia, to be managed by Cunard as a Lusitania replacement. Cunard couldn't find a crew, and so instead, and this will be interesting for quite a few of us here, White Star Line had just lost Britannic, whose crew were available. So White Star Line took over running Justicia until 1917, when she was handed over to the military and operated by the Royal Navy as a troop ship. She was sailing empty to New York to pick up troops, and on the 19th of July, 1918, she was torpedoed multiple times by UB-64. Her watertight doors held, and she was taken under tow. But the following day, UB-124 put a further 2 torpedoes into her, and she finally sank. For the wreck today, the extra depth does make it a bit darker. The ship's bow tends to get the most attention, and it's a classic view of the bow here of a transatlantic liner. One of my favourite shots is this one. I placed a video light to light up the bow, and then stood off the wreck to capture the scene. And I was actually lucky, it wasn't organised beforehand, that the 2 scooter divers turned up to give scale to the shot. But I like it, and I like the low down looking up aspect of it, which I think makes it quite striking. We've got a couple more views of the bow. We're all 64,000 ISO shots with off-board lighting, which really gives depth and definition to the wreck structure. And again here, another photographer getting a shot of the bow. I've seen some images taken last year actually, which, I'll just bring my mouse over here, which show the plating in this part is breaking away on Justicia. Perhaps after my talk, some of the Irish lads here might be able to shed more light on the state of Justicia. But it's been underwater for over 100 years. Deterioration is inevitable. So we've got some shots of the anchor. I don't know where those, I don't know if you can see those two blue lines on the screen. I don't know how those have materialized, but I can't deal with them at the moment, I'm afraid. So shot of the anchor here. This is a strobe-lit shot. The thing that I've sort of discovered in 2017 was how as you increase the ISO, you get these flares of strobe light. Even with the strobes on their lowest settings, you get these flares. And at 6400 ISO, it sort of becomes unusable. Even in clear water, you get the problems. What you lose though is the lighting up and color to the same degree. But the video lights these days are getting better and better, and they can work more effectively. So we've got another shot, another strobe lit shot here. The strobe light flare is obvious on the left-hand side especially. But you do get the soft corals lighting up and being shown in all their glory, which is quite spectacular. I like to take shots like this. The rope is still coiled around this mooring bollard. I wonder which sailor actually did that. Who it was who coiled the rope up prior to leaving harbour. And I've put this in partly because this is a high ISO shot, but lit up with video lights. So you can bring it back, bring the colour back with video lights. The deck is collapsing, and the massive capstans on the foredeck stand proud, a bit like mushrooms. But you can get under the deck. And note here, this is a handheld half-second exposure to get a view of the machinery that operates the capstans. There are some massive cogs there. There is interesting wreckage away from the bow, and the remaining shots here are from the bridge area, which is rather flattened, but bottom right, you can see the massive articulated oval portholes, which are about 3 feet across. And I know at least one person on this meeting has converted one into a very nice coffee table. Another shot of the bow, but this reminds me actually to tell you that the stern of the Justicia is also impressive, but I don't have any shots of it. You sort of need a second dive to cover that unless you have a scooter. The ship's nearly 800 feet long, which takes a fair bit of time without at 70 meters. A few deco shots of the lads here, and on the right we've got the Laura Dean coming in to pick somebody up, and then a diver coming up on the dive lift, which if you've not experienced a dive lift, is it just makes it so much easier. So my final dive of the trip that I'm going to talk about is the return to the Audacious. Audacious is actually the closest of the classics to harbour. So a return trip can often be done on the final day, which keeps the day a bit shorter. And this is the shot that was recently commended in Underwater Photographer of the Year. And I think it's the torches and divers that make this shot by giving depth to the view that would otherwise be a bit flat. And I have to give thanks to Barry and the others who were on that dive. But what are we looking at? Well, there are the two massive rudders that are standing proud. And then what we're looking at is the very aft end of the battleship. And it actually carried a torpedo tube at at the rear part. And you can see the opening, and then just inboard of that is the tube itself, which has detached and fallen to the seabed, which is quite interesting to see. In this view, you can just about see all 4 propellers. It just gives the view, I feel, just gives us an idea of the massive size of this ship. I know on the very left, you can only just see the very edge of the prop, but all 4 are there. The propellers really are impressive. High performance, designed to get 26,000 tons of ship to 21 knots quickly. They have to be powerful. And here you can see there's all sorts around this area. You can get down dirty amongst the wreckage if you want. And on the right, there's some big machinery parts from the steering gear. In addition, there are some enticing swim-throughs in this part of the wreck. We've got another side view of the stern here. And again, off-board lighting makes such a difference to the photography. And I think that's the learning point that I took away from diving here, is to not rely on my strobes and use off-board lighting to, when the visibility is good enough, you can light up the scene. It gives depth and definition to the things you're trying to take photographs of. Not far from where that shot was taken, and you can still see the 2 rudders there, but you can also see another buried 13.5-inch gun. On a first trip to Malin Head, you should take in these classics, but there are many other wrecks. Here's some of them. There are many more. Barry tends to organise classic weeks where the diving's limited to about 70 metres, 230 feet, and then deep weeks where a whole other selection of wrecks is possible, but will almost certainly include a trip to Audacious. And that's actually all I've got to say. I don't know if there are got any questions. I'm happy to answer anything. Probably need to do a bit of unmuting or something.
Rick, so there is one question coming in through the Facebook page, and I'm not sure that you'll know the answer to this, but I'm going to pose it to you. Yeah. And that is, if there is, somebody was asking about the U-20, which was the U-boat that sank the Lusitania. If there's, what are the differences between the U-20 and the U-89, if you know? I don't know. I'm sorry. If I had a bit of time to research it, I would probably be able to work it out. The U-89 is a U-87 class submarine, and that's sort of what I know about her. And that she's of the class that has two. A lot of the First War U-boats had 2 deck guns, one in front and one behind the conning tower. But I'm afraid I don't know any more about it than that. So we have another question. Somebody's asking if you plan your shots before you dive, or whether I think shots meaning pictures. If you plan your photographs before you dive, like what do you do? Do you go down and do any reconnaissance, or do you just kind of go down and let it speak to you? Like how do you plan what you're going to photograph? Okay. What I had before I went down with my stills camera, as I'd mentioned previously, I had been to Malin Head before. And so I knew what I was up against. And I also knew from seeing other people's photographs, and in actual fact, there are a lot of photographs out there of the Malin Head shipwrecks. So I did have some idea of things that I wanted to take photographs of. What was interesting was that I'd never dived the U-boat
before. And so the dive I did on it in 2017 was a first for me. And it's then interesting to review the images that I got when I went the second time, because I sort of knew better what I wanted to take photographs of. What I don't know is why on the U-boat dive, I decided to go off the wreck and do the panorama. I can't even think why I decided to do it at the time, but I did, and it actually worked out quite well for me. But otherwise, I do try and plan things, and I know on the both trips, but especially the 2018 trip, Barry was taking photographs as well, and he's probably got some photographs that are far better than mine. And I did see him signing in on this meeting. Because there was him, there was also Renee Anderson and a couple of others from Denmark who were also taking photographs. It was a real photographic trip that particular week, and it made such a difference having a lot of photographers there. For instance, the lit up stern of the Audacious, if it had just been me taking photographs, that wouldn't have been possible. And I think it was the fact that there were so many photographers there just really enhanced the whole process of taking pictures. And I think we all followed one another around. And I know that one of the divers, Martin Tierney, was the subject and was the diver to take photographs of, and he's the one lighting up the Sherman tank, and also the one looking at the gun on the Audacious.
So I wanted to call attention to one interesting part of the chat in case everybody didn't see it, and we do have another like 25 people who are watching online, so they can't see the chat. That there's an interesting fact that Jake Billingham, our resident Britannic Titanic expert, has brought to our attention, is that an interesting fact about the Justitia was that she was built in the same gantry as RMS Titanic and was built at the side of Britannic. So there's actually some photographs of the two of them together. And I know you mentioned that, but that was kind of cool.
And then the Britannic crew actually worked her for a while. I don't know whether they were then retained when she went into naval control. I couldn't find that information out, but I suspect in those days they probably had to be quite honest.
And and then your friend Andy Aston is messing with you, of course, and wants to know if you took up photography when collecting spidge became antisocial in the UK. But Scott has a question, and he says, as somebody wanting to move from video to stills, what would be your top tip for shooting wrecks? And before you answer that, as somebody who was spending her morning trying to take stills from a video, it's don't look at the wreck like this. So that all the photos, all the good stills would be blurry. Yeah. But no, seriously, if somebody is looking to move from video for stills, what would be the kind of tip?
Well, if you're looking at wreck photography, try and get a capable camera, and you don't have to buy the top of the range, but you have to buy a decent one. I know Becca's on the call here. I'm sure she would be able to help people out making choices depending on budgets. But you need a good wide angle lens, preferably a fisheye or similar, and then go and practice and don't. I always think when I started out, when I went in 2017, I was using a very capable camera, but I was limiting its ISO to 1600 and occasionally up to 3200. You can go much further than that because the quality of modern cameras can cope with it. And so don't be afraid to really boost up the ISO, because if you come back with a photograph that is really stunning but grainy, people will still think it's stunning despite it being a bit grainy. And so use the capability of the camera. And I tend to use the video lights. I've got a very expensive big blue light, which I use, but I also use some very cheap Chinese bought off Amazon lights that about £50, $70 a piece, and they work. I actually took them on Britannic, and because they're so inexpensive, they're almost disposable. And in fact, I dropped one on Britannic, and if I dropped a several $100 torch, I'd have been persuaded to have dropped back to the seabed and incurred an extra half hour of decompression. But as it was only an inexpensive thing, I thought, well, it can go. I can do without that and just buy another one when I can. So that's worth considering as well. But I think for wreck diving in good visibility, off-board lighting is the way to go. But having said that, and I'm just going to turn it completely on its head now. I this year bought a backscatter strobe, which is a very small strobe, and it comes with a snoot for doing macro work. But on its lowest power setting, it is incredibly low power. And out of interest over last summer, I actually took that on my wreck diving. So I was still using the off-board strobes, but I was introducing a little bit of strobe light with a backscatter strobe. And I found that worked. It's actually still a work in progress at the moment, but the low power of the backscatter strobe actually suits this sort of photography as well. So that's something I'm going to try more of in the coming year, hopefully.
And we just started trying out these backscatter. I don't know if everybody can see it.
I've seen
the backscatter macro wide 4300s.
Yeah. And
like we're super excited. We just got them and have been playing with them. Haven't gotten them underwater yet, but are really excited. Yeah. There they are. Macro wide.
Yeah.
Oh, here. Well, I'll take the thing off. I will. But while you answer that, there's a question from Duncan Lord who said, beautiful images. Using video lights to illuminate the bows is interesting. What power of video lights do you use? And do you just place them on the ground before retreating? How do you figure out where you're going to place them?
The video, if you can see my thumbnail, that's the video light that was used to light up the bow. This is a Chinese $50 video light. It works. It has 3 settings. It's full power, half and low power. I think that one was on full power because I was going to be moving quite away from the wreck. I would happily use a backscatter video light. But what I like, as I've said before, what I like about these ones is that they are in effect disposable. And we're working in a very hostile environment, and it's actually quite useful sometimes to be able to forget about them.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. So here we changed our background so people could see it.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I am pondering getting some of those ones myself, actually. But I'll still keep with my El Cheapo Amazon.
You used those on Britannic as well. I mean, they worked very well. They didn't explode.
They were fine. They were fine. Yeah.
So let me see if there's any other questions. I don't know if anybody has any other questions. Pop them in the chat. I'm checking the Facebook feed because there's like another, like I said, 25 people watching there. No, I think we got them all from Facebook. Any other questions?
Yeah, Rick, I was saying earlier that was what that was another cheap thing off Amazon, about what was 20, 30 quid.
Yeah.
And I haven't tried it underwater, doing like you did, but it sounds like I'm now tempted.
Yeah. Well,
I will find myself, possibly the Coast Guard vessel when I go down to it, when I can get back in the water.
Yeah.
Because we're stuck in England at the moment.
Yeah,
but find something and just go and play.
Yeah.
That's going to be my answer. Thank you very much indeed.
That's okay.
Thank you. So we do have one more question. What sort of bottom times were you getting on the wrecks?
I should have checked my log books, but I think on the I'm going to talk about 2018. In 2017, I actually had a problem with my rebreather the whole week. I'd had cell leakage, which had caused corrosion on the leads, and so I was having to restrict my dives because I was a bit concerned that things were going to fail on me, and so I wasn't able to do long dives. But on the 2018 trip, we were doing, most dives were around about the 3-hour mark. So for the submarine, we probably did about best part of an hour on the wreck, which is, but then on Justicia, which was the deepest, we were probably doing about 40 minutes. Yeah.
Great. Does anybody have any other questions? So while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any other questions to type in, I want to thank you so much. I mean, they're just like, the photographs are absolutely stunning. I can't.
To go to Malin now.
Yes, absolutely.
We're definitely.
Yeah. Get him to slow down.
I will just say there is actually a second boat that runs out of the same harbour, called the Roskill, and which is just as good. It's run by a chap called Michael McVeigh, who has actually been doing it even longer than Donald here. And I think Barry uses Michael a bit more for the deeper diving. There are some fantastic wrecks in 120 meters that you can dive off Malin.
So awesome. I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you so much. Amazing stories, amazing wrecks. So next week, so our series is continuing. Next week, we have Bradley Sheard, who I believe is on the call, a fantastic photographer from Maryland. He is going to be talking to us about Guadalcanal and Iron Bottom Sound. So World War II shipwrecks from Iron Bottom Sound. His photographs are also stellar. So he'll be here next week. The week after that, we're changing times. We're going to be 7 o'clock on March 4th with Marty Klein, the father of side scan sonar. And he's going to talk to us about his amazing life and career. And then on March 18th, I'm excited to announce for Women's History Month, Women's Dive Day, and Women's History Month, and celebrated women who are wreck divers. We're going to feature the photography of Becca Boring, who is on the call with us, and also Brandy Mueller, Brandy is going to talk about photographing the airplane graveyard in the Solomon Islands, and Becca is going to talk about truck. So we have a really amazing, and then Mark Corbett is going to end the month. He's a spectacular photographer from Virginia, and he's going to talk about the wrecks in that area. So we have an amazing lineup continuing. We hope we'll see you all back here next week at 6 o'clock for Brad's presentation about Guadalcanal. And if nobody has any other questions.
I've just seen a question here.
Yeah, you got another one? All right.
So the couple of things. Stewie Andrews, who I know sort of, says the Irish government have got a really good book about the wrecks all around Ireland. I did try and get it one time, but it was one of those ones that's a bit tricky to get anywhere else other than Ireland. And then a bit further down, somebody's, what's my favourite image from the ones that I shared tonight? I actually like the one of the Justicia with her bow and the two scooter divers coming around the bow. I think that captures what Malin Head diving is all about. And then someone else has put MV Salute. That was a British liverboard boat, also does trips around Malin Head. It used to, but it doesn't anymore. Salute is moored up in Portland Harbour now, and Al Wright doesn't go up to Malin anymore. But yeah.
Awesome. And I don't know if Karen Flynn is still on the call. I don't know if she's still there. Our friend Karen Flynn. I don't know if that's our Karen or Karen Flynn. I just wanted to give a shout out to Karen Flynn, because I don't know if you saw the Mars landing tonight, and Karen was a huge part of that. Really? And she's been talking about it for weeks and weeks and years. And she's our good friend, a wreck diver from Maryland as well. And she was part of the amazing team that landed that rover on Mars. So we congratulate her tonight. I'm sure her internet has been going in and out, so she might still be watching on Facebook. But thank you, Karen, for your amazing work as well. Shout out to you. Yeah,
I've also just seen in the chat, Stewie Andrews has given some information about the U20. Mm-hmm. It was about 6 meters, so 20 feet shorter than the U89. And the U20 had 2x2 tubes fore and aft, whereas U89 4 and 2. That doesn't quite make sense, but anyway, it was a bit shorter than the U89.
Mike Boring, didn't we see the conning tower of U20 sitting on the beach at Jutland?
We did. It's in the museum, the Jutland Museum.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Wow. Yeah, they got the conning tower.
We took
there.
Pictures of it like sitting on the beach or something.
Yeah, it just seemed really kind of out of place, being such a historical. I mean, it is a museum, but it's just sitting outside.
Yeah. In one of the towns in I think it's Downings. I'm not 100% sure, but there's the gun off the Laurentic is mounted outside a hotel, which is quite interesting.
Talk about spidge.
Yeah, well, Laurentic was carrying gold, and apparently they salvaged all apart from 4 bars of gold. So that's the story that all the divers are given when they jump in, if they're diving Laurentic.
Rick, we went to, Brad and I were on a trip on the Loyal Mediator. We left from Oban, Scotland, and came across the Irish Sea to Lough Swilly. And the dock there at Lough Swilly, we were told, was built because of the Laurentic gold when they were offloading it. It was a real heavy duty pier and dock, and it was built because of the gold.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, as always. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll all be back here with us next week for those amazing images of Guadalcanal. And everybody be safe. If you're in the northeast corridor here, be safe in all that snow. And we will see you next week. Thank you. Thank you again, Rick, so much.
Thanks so much, man.
No problem.
Take care, everyone.
Right.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gorgeous images, Rick.
Yeah.
Thank you.